May 2nd, 2022. We're going to jump right into our City Council workshop. First up, we have Chief Moen. And Chief Moen, love for you to be able to give us a little bit more of an in-depth dive into your police department restructuring program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. An additional budget proposal for your consideration as part of the City Manager's a la carte structure is a restructuring of the department when it comes to the command structure. Right now, we currently, in the patrol division, we have 4 patrol teams that consist of, at full staff, 6 officers, 2 sergeants. 2 of the teams work day shifts, the other 2 teams work night shifts. And we have a lieutenant that oversees 2 of those patrol teams. 1 day shift lieutenant, 1 night shift lieutenant. And we've been in this current structure for about 8 years now. And the thought is to reclassify 3 of our current sergeants to the rank of lieutenant. What that would do is that would bring a lieutenant over each patrol team within the patrol division. Currently, what we've seen is when you have 2 sergeants working at the same time, brings the command and control structure, it makes it kind of fuzzy because in the supervisor accountability, we prefer to have supervisors accountable for employees report to one supervisor, and the one supervisor is responsible for the people underneath them. And we've lost that a little bit with this current structure. Whereas bringing a lieutenant in and having a lieutenant and a sergeant over each patrol team, that tightens that command structure down and allows for greater accountability where our current lieutenants don't necessarily work with the patrol teams every day. The patrol lieutenants are on a set schedule through the work week, and the patrol teams are on a 3-on, 3-off schedule. So they're constantly rotating the days that they're working. So there are some times where the lieutenants won't see one of their patrol teams for 3 days. And that makes the communication, especially when we have a lot going on, and email can only do so much. It's good to have that face-to-face communication with staff. And also, with 2 sergeants working, you have that senior sergeant that they're primarily doing the job of a lieutenant when that lieutenant's not there. So by restructuring this takes us back to the way we used to be before 8 years ago, where we had a lieutenant on each patrol team. And we found that, we had great accountability with that. Communication was pretty clear. And for example, I was speaking with one of our newer officers today who transitioned from another agency and touching base with that officer to see how they're doing now that they've cleared field training, they're on their own, how the transition was, how their transition to the agency's been. And out of the blue, he mentioned one of those things is it's kind of confusing sometimes which sergeant that you see when you have 2 sergeants working. So this restructure will allow us to tighten that accountability up quite a bit. Also, that would give us a lieutenant over the professional standards division. Right now, we have 1 sergeant that consists of professional standards, and that sergeant is responsible for training, recruitment, internal investigations, and background investigations. That sergeant is very overworked right now. The workload that he's currently tasked with, given our recruitment, given our selection process, our background investigations and whatnot, it's more than one person can handle. And also, currently, our accreditation management structure is our accreditation functions managed by the city's communication and community engagement department. And Liz does a great job, and what she does is she'll farm out certain standards to certain supervisors to look for those proofs of compliance. And what we found is that's kind of created some haphazard responses to our accreditation standards where they're not being met fully, or the compliances aren't really what we need. And what that's doing is that's putting added pressure on those patrol sergeants to be looking for those compliances. So that's pulling them off the road, to be digging through the computer, looking for those accreditation compliances, and then getting them to the accreditation manager for review and to get collated into the filing system. So That's taking the patrol supervisors off the road. That's less time they're spending on the road and directly supervising their officers. And that is adding to the added pressures of those sergeants, given the lack of a lieutenant on at all times and having those extra duties. So by bringing a lieutenant into that professional standards division, what we would do is be able to bring the accreditation management completely out of community engagement and communications back into professional standards, where we would have one person dedicated to accreditation management. Because that accreditation management accounts for about, when it's done properly, 65 to 70% of somebody's workload out of the course of a day. So that extra person in professional standards will be able to pick up the slack when it comes to training coordination, background investigations, recruitment, and whatnot, and kind of ease that burden off of that one professional standard sergeant. So by reclassifying those three patrol sergeants to the rank of lieutenant, that would leave one sergeant left that would come out of the patrol division. And what that would allow us to do would be to create the proactive community enforcement unit. And what this unit would do, this would provide a laser focus into the city of Auburn when it comes to community issues and specific crimes. Right now, we have 2 officers that are assigned to the Maine Drug Enforcement Agency. They're part of a 7-person task force out of the Lewiston office, and they're responsible for drug investigations in the entire Tri-County area. So for 7 people, 6 agents and a supervisor, that's a large workload for the Tri-County area. By bringing these 2 drug agents back strictly into Auburn under PACE and be able to focus them on Auburn drug crimes, that allows us to drill down deeper into Auburn's drug problem, where Maine Drug Enforcement, they're looking at the middle level and up people within the drug transaction hierarchy, where for us, we could provide that laser focus to start picking off those low-hanging fruit, those street dealers, those dealers that are operating out of our apartment houses, and really present a directed effort to get those houses under control. That would allow us to identify these people, get them up on charges, work with the landlords on getting them out of those houses, and really taking back our streets. In the council retreat earlier this year, one of the goals that you folks came up was reclaiming our streets. And PACE would be a prime example of the ability to be able to do that. That takes away from farming our agents out to a tri-county response and dialing in on Auburn. And not only is it about the drug crime, but it's about those quality of life issues, where we can really laser in and focus on neighborhoods and making our streets safe again. That sergeant would oversee those 2 drug agents, also our traffic enforcement officer. And to round out that unit, we would need to activate the traffic enforcement officer position that was frozen in the FY20 budget. It wasn't eliminated, it was frozen at the start of the pandemic, not knowing what was going to happen with the pandemic and whatnot. And that was a kind of a low-hanging fruit for us to be able to save funding, not knowing what was happening. By having those 2 traffic enforcement officers round out with the drug investigators, they can start looking at that strategic enforcement, focusing on our speeding violations, our intersection movements. We have a lot of red light running. And out of those traffic stops, those often break into ancillary drug investigations, where they're transporting drugs in and out of Auburn. Auburn, this Tri-County, this area is a service area for the Tri-County area when it comes to drug trafficking. And by eliminating that or reducing that, we're increasing the quality of life here in Auburn. So this does come with a cost. If we were to restructure the department as presented, reclassifying 3 of those sergeants to the rank of lieutenant would cost $38,000. Because what we're doing is we're taking 3 sergeants, elevating them to that rank. So that cost is the difference between their current pay and what it would be to go to the first step of the lieutenant scale. The other expense would be adding that traffic officer back in and activating that position. That salary is $55,300 to start on step 1 of the patrol salary. And the fringe benefits for that position is about $31,000 per per year when you take in all of the fringe benefits with that. So the total expenses of the restructure for operational expenses would be $125,000. Also that we have to consider is those 2 drug agents that we have at Maine Drug Enforcement Agency. Those are contracted positions, so we receive contract revenue from the state for those 2 positions. And that contract revenue is about $145,000 a year. So if we were to complete the restructure, we would see that a loss of revenue for about $145,000 from the state, and the operation expenses are about $125,000. And with what I forgot to mention with the accreditation management, as a clear assessor, I travel across the country conducting assessments for CALEA, and having accreditation management being within the purview of professional standards, that's a best policing practice throughout the country. It's a very common model, so the police department has that control over that and can be able to work that effectively.
Hey, Council, you have any, just to sum up, we're looking at this is basically a net increase in the operating budget for this year of $270,000.
Correct.
Okay. Council, and we could make a motion to amend tonight's reading of the operating budget and add this in if you wanted or discuss it. We also have a second reading. I will suggest that we percolate this a little bit and wait until the second reading if we want to add it. But if you wanted to add it tonight, you can do that as well. But are there any questions from Chief Moen specifically about this?
Yeah, I've got one. So it sounds like, I mean, you've got several steps here that would complete the restructure. To me, when I hear this, I want your confirmation is the promotion of to lieutenant, to me, sounds like the highest priority item of the list that you gave us.
It is. The reclassification of the lieutenants is that high priority, because that really tightens down our accountability and actually lessens our liability window when it comes to having those lieutenants.
So, not that we're going to do this, but if we were going to pick a piece, that would be the one that we really need to do.
That would be the priority, yes.
Okay.
Would it be the drug task force? It would be the elevation of lieutenants?
There'll be the elevation lieutenants first, with the PACE unit being secondary.
PACE unit being secondary. So that's your 1, 2. Accreditation?
Accreditation, that restructure would include the accreditation piece as well, because you're reclassifying those 3 sergeants to lieutenants. That would leave a remaining sergeant in the patrol division that if that were left, we could find something for that sergeant to be involved with. But the restructure would need to happen in order to create the PACE unit. Right. So the priority is the restructure for the command levels, and the creation of PACE would be secondary.
You have a vault?
No,
So
that's
if
good.
I could, I'm going to paraphrase Councilor Staples' comment about prioritization. If you had your choice, and regardless of any type of prerequisite, what is going to be the most impactful to the city of Auburn? Either the reclassification of lieutenants and the restructuring, or the PACE unit?
It's going to be split, I'd say almost 50-50, because with the reclassification, we are tightening up it's making us more effective. With that communication, with having those lieutenants there, it's having that oversight to be able to manage incidents properly. And with the creation of that lieutenant's position for professional standards, that brings our accreditation management much more manageable. Accreditation is a priority for us. We've been accredited for 20 years, and we are the only advanced accredited agency in the state of Maine. And right now, accreditation pays for itself, because through Maine Municipal, we save 10% of our liability insurance premium because we're accredited. That equates to about $5,000 a year, which is about what it costs for being a member of CALEA and having those standards. So that part pays for itself. So to maintain that efficient operation of the agency and management of the agency, that restructure would be the priority. And then by doing that restructure, creating PACE, that would bring in that laser focus to work on the quality of life. One has to occur for the other to happen, because restructuring the command levels gives us the ability to take that sergeant to redirect those resources to create the PACE unit. So one needs the other. For PACE to happen, that restructure would have to happen. The restructure could happen without the creation of PACE, but it takes one to help the other.
Any further questions? Councilor House?
Does this create any backfill need? Do you need to add additional positions after?
No, it does not. The only thing that will require backfill will be that activation of the traffic enforcement officer position that was previously frozen. But it does not create any additional positions beyond that.
Okay, so we're not losing people,
No.
traffic violations, things like that?
They're actually increasing, right?
We'll
Making
actually
more.
be increasing our traffic enforcement.
Correct. Just wanted to clarify that, just to make sure. Okay, thank you.
In theory, I guess, you're increasing net one, but you still are redeploying two assets from Tri-County back to Seoul Auburn. It's
Exactly.
like a net three, really.
Right, because what we're doing is redeploying those resources to Auburn versus Tri-County, and allows us to bring those traffic enforcement officers in to really laser on those high-priority traffic safety areas.
Councilor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Manager, how much of a budget mill rate increase would be the proposal of the good police chief?
I can make sure I get that for you, at the next reading, so you'll know exactly what that impact will be.
Okay, and then may I get your dollar amount again, please?
The total expenses for the restructure operationally is $125,000,
Okay,
and then there's a loss of contract revenue, which is $145,000.
wait a minute.
270 net increase,
Okay, that's what I was, thank you,
11 cents on the mill.
thank you.
Any other questions for Chief? I've got one parting question. This time next year, when you come back and we're looking at your budget, will you be able to have quantifiable data showing the improvement with this investment?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. Thanks very much, Chief. Appreciate that.
Just a quick follow-up. How will this impact the request that came from the work with Tri-County Mental Health? Will the PACE unit be the ones that will be assisting in that process?
Yes. With the creation of PACE, that would allow us to dedicate those resources, not only to the drug enforcement, but also to the follow-up as well. Working with Tri-County and the Support Me initiative to be able to pair those officers with that person to be able to go out and do those follow-ups to those overdoses and whatnot.
Thank you. And one other thing, just when we pull those two, if we pull those two officers away from the Tri-County Task Force, excuse me, they'll be backfilled by some other officer from some other unit within the Tri-County region?
That would be up to Maine Drug Enforcement. They may take those positions and reallocate them to other agencies. I don't know what that would look like. But we would be responsible for our own drug investigations. And with our person assigned to the Federal HIDTA Task Force, we'd be working in conjunction with that person to bring more federal prosecutions to the area.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. We'll see you a little bit later. Next up, we have Dan Goyette. Talk about Lake Grove Park, otherwise known as the Outlet.
So, good evening, councilors, mayor. At the first meeting back in April, yes, I presented to you what we had found with regards to Lake Grove Park and swimming there. Since then, we have formulated the plan for water quality testing. It's in conjunction with the state of Maine, came out with a recreational swimming guide for municipalities on testing regimen and E. coli levels. The way it works is you test weekly. If you have a failing test, you're required to test within 24 hours to verify those results, and the beach area, the swim area remains closed until you get a passing result. So in talks with the water district, that's not something they can handle, is that type of testing. We have talked with, they're willing to train public works staff or park staff, or recreation staff, I should say, to do the testing. So the testing samples will be taken by City of Auburn staff. They'll be brought to a local lab for testing. So we've got that kind of mapped out, how that would work. We haven't nailed down a cost yet for the testing, but I can shoot you an email with that if you like. With regards to the fountains, we went out with a bid 4 weeks ago. We did not receive any responses. I did talk to one vendor during the process, and I have been unable to get back a hold of him and find out why he didn't put in a number. But the next step is to start talking to golf courses and finding out who, well, I've reached out to some golf courses, waiting for messages back on who they use for their suppliers for their fountains. So that's kind of where we're at.
It's not quite swimming season, but ice is out.
Yes.
So, council, we have some decisions made. We have $150,000 that's been allocated from ARPA money into the purchase and acquisition of fountains and other equipment to help with water quality testing. Bottom line is to allow for swimming and other types of recreation within the outlet. Have we looked at, or do we have anywhere in our budget staff time for lifeguarding, supervision, and so forth of this? Is there a hole in our budget
Well,
if this is a go?
we don't staff that in that capacity. That's not what we've done in the past.
For swimming?
For swimming, yeah. So that is an allowable access to water, just as other accessible water access is out there. We have language regarding, I think we buoy off a section of the, it's not that deep. It's a lot of signage for parent responsibility, but we do not staff that. If that's something that the council's interested in, that's gonna, we can do that. We can work through what that cost will be, and we can bring that back before you, but currently that's not anything that we've done. I don't know
A long time.
how long it's been.
The rec department brings usually a lifeguard in when they do their own program.
Right, yeah. As general public access, there's not a lifeguard on duty.
Councilor Gary, you had a question?
Council Walker pretty much answered what I was going to ask Bill.
I've got,
Yeah.
so is there a cost associated with all these tests? I'm just wondering.
There will be, yes.
is-
Probably be a couple $100 a week in testing costs at a minimum.
And so you're looking at a weekly test, and that's coming out of those ARPA funds, if we're going to do that?
When we see what comes in, because we didn't get a bid, so when we see what the cost will be for installation, we'll carve out what it will be for the first year out of those funds to make sure we're doing all the testing. So you won't see any other impact. We do got to train up a staff member to be able to go out and do the testing, but we'll carve that out of these funds just to cover the first year, because this was really your pilot year. Let's see what this will do, see what it will provide, see where the testing's coming in at, and that'll give us a better, and a lot of it's going to have to do with our weather this year. A lot of it's going to have to do with just how much water we have, how much rainfall we have. All those things impact this, and so when we take a look at the numbers of the testing that we did last year, I think all but 1 week it passed. So there was 1 week where it did not, but there was a very different year for weather. So we'll continue looking at it, and we're going to continue moving forward. Right now, you've allocated it. I just want to make sure at any point in this process, if you say, put the brakes on this, whatever, that's the time to tell us. But right now, we're proceeding. So I wanted Dan to come because the bid had gone, the RFP had gone out. We put it on the agenda prior to, I think it closed Thursday.
Closed last Thursday.
And so we went ahead and put it on the agenda, but without receiving any, we'll now go out and see what we can get for some costs.
Do all the recreation areas have to do the same testing? Water?
Yes, so that's part of that new ruling that Dan was talking about. I think they've always had some, but
2021, they kind
Yeah.
of spelled it out. There was always a coastal water testing requirement. Now, municipally owned inland waters and streams they're not necessarily required to testing, but there's guidance on there what you should be doing for testing.
Councilor Haas? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Walker, did you have a follow-up on that?
Yeah, requirement or rule, law, it's not.
It's not a law. It's their guidance is what they call it.
That's practice.
Yep.
Councilor
Yeah.
Haas?
Thank you. When we send out these bids, usually in the past, how long before we receive any information back? Like typically?
We usually bid for 3 weeks.
Okay. And in that 3 weeks, we would get multiple responses, I would assume?
You usually get them the last day.
Okay, so that was over a week ago.
It was last Thursday.
or last Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the bid closed
Yeah, the
on
bid's
Thursday.
Well, that's what I
Bid's
mean.
closed, Yeah,
So
so.
if
yeah.
we're not getting any vendors that are saying, hey, this is something we want to look at.
I was contacted by a vendor, and I don't know why he decided not to go forward. He had pump size, we would discuss pump sizing and all kinds of things, so I'm not sure why they didn't submit a number.
But he was aware of the
Oh,
due
yeah.
date?
Yep.
You know, there's a couple of things that are red flags here for me. A, it's expending money on something that is not proven to actually increase the quality of the water. But below that, I'm still doubtful on how that the water is that bad. Okay, I do think it's episodic based upon weather and climate patterns. I think weekly tests, or even more frequently, depending upon the weather pattern that we're in, followed by a 24-hour kind of right to cure, if you would, post a negative test. Those are all good best practices that should be done, period, at any swimming facility. That's one thing. But I will say this, and it's been 25 years or more, and I'll put my, water safety instructor trainer hat on with the American Red Cross. It's the only thing I was qualified to do after I got out of the Army, by the way, because I did it in the Army. But without having lifeguards, in this community where we have a very, very, very bad history of water safety and water training, and we're surrounded by water, I just don't feel comfortable. I would probably recommend that if we were going to expend these ARPA funds, we do it in the following fashion. We'd allocate a percentage of it for testing, periodic testing of the water to, at least at a minimum, create more baselines and data points that we can compare with in the future. It's a minimal cost if you do it periodically. That's first. Second, that we contract out with an outside agency for lifeguard services, even if that means that we're only allowing swimming during a abbreviated time frame, if you would, okay? Whether it be weekends or evenings or something to that effect. And whether it be the YMCA, the YWCA, or outside organizations for that coverage. I think that is more important than the water quality to a point, is the water safety. And I've just seen too many negatives, and we've all seen too many negatives happen with fatalities in this community. That's what I would look at. I think it'd probably be an allowable expenditure of those funds.
So we would, no, Mayor, I think it's a good plan. I think what we would do is we would come back before you at the next meeting with, we'll have to take a look at how you appropriated those funds to make sure that we're making the change. And then we will work up by the next meeting costs associated with when, how many hours would be available for beach access and be able to make that available for you, so you'll know what that amount is. The ARPA funds, you allocate by 2024, you spend by 2026. So if you want to do a pilot project, still have that money allocated, but do a pilot project where we're taking a look at implementing this with just testing and safety measurements for water safety coverage. We could do that, and we could do that this year. Do all the testing, see what it looks like, and determine whether or not we have, how many weeks were we able to be operational because of that. We can work that in. It'll be, there might be a cost for whoever we contract with to provide that service, because we'll be on the hook for that even if the beach is closed for that week. So until the numbers come back clear, so there might be a cost to that. So, but we could do that. We can bring that back if that's what the council would like.
Council thoughts? Councilor White and the council.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to go without the aeration. From what Dan said, people wouldn't guarantee it anyways. And if we had 1 week last year, or even if it was a couple weeks this year, I think people would just be so thrilled to have it reopened that they wouldn't worry, they wouldn't sweat being closed, and they don't want to be there anyways if the
So-
the counts are bad. So
As a follow-up to that, as we go back around and make comments, would it make sense for us to be able to advertise certain hours where we have coverage and other hours where we don't, but we still don't restrict it, right? Because I think there are, it's whether or not you want it restricted. It's about managing it now, because we're not going to close the beach down. It's open during certain hours. But we can advertise for parents who are bringing young ones that during these hours, we'll have lifeguard on duty, safety, those kind of things. So that way those are the hours we have someone there, but it's not necessarily restricting if a family wants to go and wade in the water. It's really what you're doing there. You're wading in that water. They could still do that. We're not limiting that. Because now we gotta have somebody there to police that, right? To make sure that someone's not going in the water, because now we put the restriction. But people are gonna still be there to use the picnic tables, everything else that we have going on out there. So as we continue, just I
No
want to make sure
minors without
that might be a
parents, no Minors
modification.
without parents, strict rules on that.
Sorry?
Just, I mean, there's a whole list, I mean, and there's organizations that will cover those rules. Obviously, your insurance company will as well. You know, parents have to be in the water with the child. I mean, it's hard to police, it's hard to enforce. And I'm not up to speed on the liability aspect of that, but there's one, that's a liability. The other one is just concern. So, but it's up to the council. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pretty much on board, but I'd like to see maybe, other than just the set hours, like for holiday weekends or holidays, to have expanded hours on those days. And if the costs of the water testing, the guards, even when it's posted times, I would like to be able to, if we need more money, to get some more money out of the ARPA fund. I mean,
If we need more money, you said?
yes.
Let's look at the budget. See what the manager comes back with. Any other questions or comments on this?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, as we expand this and open it up to people actually swimming and we start doing the tests, we should just monitor those tests, and if we see the numbers starting to go up, then maybe we reevaluate and we give a bubbler a try. I don't know, but I think, you know, starting without it makes sense to me.
Establish a baseline. Any other comments, Councilor Moore?
Do we have an approximation on, in a normal, I know it's a moving target, but in a normal season, how many weeks are typically swimmable for Lake Grove?
Last year was the year that I believe it was last year that we had consistent testing.
Last year, we had consistent testing. There was one field
Periodic.
sample. A follow-up sample wasn't taken within 24 hours or anything like that. It was just done on the next regularly scheduled testing date, which was pretty much a week later. I know, not the COVID year, not 2020, but 2019, there was pretty frequent tests, and I think there were 3 weeks that it failed.
Like,
Don't quote me on that, but there was one
Yeah.
year it was like 3 weeks.
when
when
do people typically, and I guess, and I'll rephrase my question, when do people typically start swimming over there? Like, when I was a kid, I'd get into some crazy water, and now I'm not so much anymore, but like, is this a late May, early June thing, and it goes through September?
Whenever the weather shifts.
weather, yeah.
Yeah. And I think the important piece too is, and I think Dan was going to weigh in on this when we talked about, you know, the testing that's going to fail this is really about E. coli. That's what's going to fail that. So putting anything in the water as far as the aeration, that's not going to affect that test. So that test is going to be what it is. Now, that's going to affect the water quality and all the
It'll
other
help
pieces.
with the algae in the water, but it
so-
won't help with E. coli.
Right.
And the way we used to open the beach was with the recreation department. It was usually about 9 weeks.
Yeah,
That's how we usually ran
School
that.
vacation.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's basically how we used to run it.
Yeah.
We ran the whole scenario, though. We hired the lifeguards, we did everything.
Okay, I
So
think we
we'll
got
come
some.
back. Yeah, we're fine. We'll come back at the next meeting and we'll provide you all the
With
information.
no bubbler.
I don't think.
We're not going to do that in the initial?
I'd rather
See how
see
the
that
year
money
goes.
going towards lifeguards.
I'll still try and
Lifeguards
get you
tested.
some numbers just so you have it.
Yeah.
We're establishing data points, and that's key to make good decisions. So, okay, thanks, Mr. Manager, appreciate it.
wish.
That's it for our public city council workshops. We have an executive session at this time, and I'll entertain a motion pursuant to 1 MRSA. You think I'd have this memorized?
It's right up there on the screen.
1 MRSA, Section 405, 6E, executive session to discuss economic development.
Mr. Mayor, it's C. This is for,
Oh, I'm sorry, C. C. C.
Second.
I got a motion from Councilor Whiting, second from Councilor Milks. All those in favor? Okay, we'll reconvene at 7 o'clock for our normal meeting. Thank you very much for being here.
So
Okay, we have nothing on the consent item. First item on the agenda are the minutes of the April 19th, 2022 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Motion, Counselor Walker, second for Counselor Staples. All those in favor? Unanimous, 7-0. Now on to communications, presentations, and recognition. I'd like to just turn over to the council, start with Counselor Staples, work our way around.
Nothing for me this week.
Nothing for me either.
Nothing for me, thank you.
All set.
Nothing at this time?
Counselor Gary?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I was just trying to get my notes as I compose myself. Anyways, without notes. The city motto is a very important. It says, "We don't take any steps backwards." As a way to accomplish that, the art of being a good city mayor is to make sure that the council, as well as the public, are all brought up at the same level of understanding before moving forward. Without being brought up and building a good foundation, a lot of miscommunications and things happen. Legislature, they try at times because they don't want to give up their power. They try to change the rules, the playing field on citizens' initiatives and the initiative process. I do not want to see, going forward, our city, whether this council or any councils in the future, to go after and change the people's right to petition their government. And as long as I'm a counselor or living in the city of Auburn, I will fight to support the initiative process. I support these petitions that are out there now, and I will be collecting a few signatures as well as notarizing, because I believe it's the right thing to do.
Communication, a couple things. First and foremost, I just want, and I wish he was here tonight, I just want to give a big acknowledgement on behalf of the City Council and all the residents of Auburn for the great work that Chief Moen and the Auburn Police Department did just last week. Really, yeah. You know, and I just want everybody that worked on this case, supported the case, and really got a positive resolution is something that was all too close to all of us, how grateful we are for good police work and really getting out there and frankly saving someone's life. So again, I want to make sure that's mentioned. Next, Memorial Day weekend. Several years ago, the Auburn City Council entered into an initiative to update the veteran memorial stones, first donated by the Lions Club, at our Veteran Park, which is off Summer Street. We had a great ceremony there a couple years ago, and we really just noticed that it was not brought up to speed with a lot of, unfortunately, the most recent conflicts that our nation has gone through. That has been commissioned, that has been completed, that will be installed. We will have a ceremony dedicating those stones on Friday, May 27th, right now tentatively at 4 o'clock. But we'll be putting together a group of fellow veterans for veteran service organizations to help plan and execute that. So I just want to make sure everybody in the city can put that down on their calendar. Last communication, I just want to make sure the council is well aware that Tuesday, LD 2003 was signed into law by the governor. I was actually at the bill signing in Augusta with members of the legislature, the governor, and folks from Chamber of Commerce to housing rights advocates. LD 2003, everybody needs to read it. I've talked to the city manager about it. There's several sections in LD 2003 that we need to be aware of, and the planning board needs to be aware of as we're going through our rezoning initiatives. Give you a couple examples. And this, by the way, does take effect July of 2023. So we have a little over a year before it takes effect. In it, there's several mentions of a right to build a home, actually up to 2 units on a parcel of land in which the area already allows for residential. the law. That's going to affect the agricultural income standard significantly, or eliminate it. We need to look at that. ADUs by right do not count towards any type of density. And if you do have density limits within a certain zone, if someone's going to build an affordable housing complex as defined within law, that density limit is raised by 2.5 times. So if we implemented a density cap of, let's say, 10 in a certain zone, and someone wanted to come in and build a new apartment complex, they could actually go up to 25 units per acre there. Our form-based coding, thankfully, as we're already starting to work on, doesn't have any density caps. Without density caps, it's 2.5 times 0. It's all about the form, which is one of the reasons we started working on this simultaneously to 2003, working down the legislature, so we knew how to properly prepare for this. We're already well ahead of the game. We're well ahead of any other municipality in the state, but there's still a lot more that we need to take in consideration. So I just want to make sure the manager, staff, council, and the public understands this is something that needs to be taken into consideration as we move forward. That's it from communication on my end. I'll turn it over to the manager.
I have nothing to report.
And we're going to go back to the agenda. Open session. We have the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. If you could, please step up to the podium, give us your name and address, and kindly limit your comments to 3 minutes.
My name's Maureen O'Brien. My husband and I have lived at 42 Winter Street for almost 40 years. We've raised our family here. We are around the corner from the PAL Center. When I first saw the plans for the new PAL Center, I wanted to talk to my city councilor, Ryan Haas, about my concerns and emailed him on April 6th, asking him to call me, but I didn't hear back from him. At the April 19th City Council meeting, I introduced myself to him and asked if he had received my email. He said he did, but he had many people ahead of me to call back and did not know when he would call me back because he was busy with home and work obligations. On April 22nd, Councilor Hawes emailed me saying, after your inflammatory demands and intentional public criticism, I will accept your email of concerns but cannot guarantee a response due to the tremendous support this project has received. Mr. Hawes, after I picked up a copy of the new PAL Center plans, I went around to people who live in my neighborhood of Winter Street, Summer Street, and all around Chestnut Park. I spoke to over 50 people. Mr. Hawes, you say the project has received tremendous support. From whom? Not the people I talked to. They hadn't been told that the plans included closing Chestnut Street. The city wanted to close Chestnut Street in 2018, again, without talking to people who live in the neighborhood. On September 7th, 2018, Phil Crowell called me, told me that closing Chestnut Street was off the table, but now he's put it back on the table without notice. When my neighbor who lives on Winter Street but has her driveway on Chestnut Street saw the plans, she was very upset. She said that means everyone will be turning around in her driveway when they see the street is closed. One neighbor whose backyard overlooks the basketball courts told me he has called the police because there were people being loud on the courts, on the basketball courts, at 2 o'clock in the morning. The all-night lighting from the courts is so bright he had to buy special shades to sleep at night. I've had to buy them too. The police told him that if he didn't like it, he could move. That sounds like the message I got from Mr. Hawes. Are all the city councilors responding to their constituents like this? Do you take calls from the public? This past Saturday, the Chestnut Field was hosting a gathering from a local church. Having kids and families in the field having a cookout and playing games was a good thing, but having 2 hours of loud music blasting was not good. What if the new PAL Center was at the old Lake Street School? I wonder how the neighbors there would feel about it. At one point, the PAL was supposed to be a police substation. Given our high crime rate in the neighborhood, that would make sense, but it never happened. We never got foot patrols or bike patrols either. We had one neighborhood watch meeting at the PAL Center with a pretty good turnout, but never heard from anyone again. The worst thing about the new PAL Center is that it's huge and it has glass walls. How long before they are broken? The vandalism in the neighborhood is high. I brought my 5-year-old grandson down to the courts to ride his bike. The gates between the new football courts have already been vandalized and can't be closed anymore. Why doesn't the city work with the YMCA and the Boys and Girls Club to get a pool in Auburn?
Ma'am?
That $8.6 million
Excuse me,
would be a
ma'am.
great
If you
start.
could- if you
In
have-
summary, you should talk to people before you
Ma'am.
make plans that affect their homes and neighborhoods.
Anybody else from the public would like to speak on the first open session?
Good evening. Andy Titus, 24 Rubelite Lane.
I'm sorry, your last name again, sir?
Titus with a
Titus?
T. Yes, capital T. I just wanted to comment. I noticed in the workshop you're talking about the Lake Grove Park, and I've heard a couple of workshops, and I haven't heard some of the things that happened. A little bit of legacy knowledge. I remember when that was closed. It was very painful because they kept having biohazard there, because as people congregated, the more people that was there, and if there was a little bit of a warm summer, they had to close it. And it was extremely painful to finally close it for good. So I didn't hear anything about the costs involved with having to make that so that doesn't happen again. Aerating it, as they said, it's not going to do it. The biohazard will still be there. And if we go through that expense and get everybody in there and get it open and then have to close it in 2 weeks, that's going to be very painful. So that expense, and also the bird mitigation, I mean, I know what it costs for the lake to keep the seagulls off the lake. And the other thing you have to do is make sure you spend money on the geese, the seagulls that might be getting in that small confined area. Two very major expenses that before we spend $150,000 to see if we want to use it as the beach, those are two major expenses. I don't think it's been really fully vetted yet. Just wanted to make that point.
No, thank you, yeah, and we did, we'll know more about it, and it'll be a topic on next meeting. Anybody else? Sir?
My name's Jay Bishop. I live on Lakeshore Drive. Basically, I just wanted to talk a little bit and give a couple perspectives that maybe you guys haven't thought about in reference to this whole septic upgrade systems. To make it clear, I'm not against it. I definitely think protecting the water is a good thing, and upgraded systems are only going to help that situation of it degrading. But I will say you've got 60% of the people in that watershed that are either retired or coming up to retirement. And some of the things that I have heard in some of the meetings have to do with current systems and forcing people to do things when those were grandfathered all of these years. Some of these people are in their 90s and can't even get out of their home. I know this because I help them out with plowing and stuff like that as a good neighbor. They may pass away in that home. What happens when they pass away? Somebody inherits that house, now they inherit that responsibility, and it's a responsibility they don't even know about. As well as some of these people are going to sell their homes because they want to go into a cheaper home. They can't maintain the house that they have now. They're going to be possibly put into a position when they can barely afford to survive now to spend $20,000 to upgrade a system. I think all of that should be taken in consideration at least on existings. Again, I don't disagree with making changes that are going to help protect that water, but I don't think the people that have lived there all their lives and when they bought these houses or built these houses, those septic systems were put in up to ordinance. And you know as well as I know, I live in that watershed, if my system starts failing and starts acting up, I'm going to have to fix it, or I'm not going to be able to use my bathroom. And once you've made that change, I'm going to have to meet your standards. And if I get to that point, I'm going to do it. But I don't think anybody should be forced prior to that. I think you should all consider that when trying to push the rest of this through. Thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak on a topic that's on tonight's agenda? None being? I'll close this first open session. We're going to move on to new business, which we actually don't have any of tonight. Next, we have a public hearing on Community Development Block Grant and Home Annual Action Plan. This is mandated by federal law as well. I'll open this up to the public to speak. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this topic? If so, please come to the podium, state your name and address. None being, close the open session, or public hearing rather. Next is Order 55-05022022, approving the allocation of $100,000 in American Rescue Plan Act funds for the Lake Auburn Community Center. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Counselor Hawes on the second, Milks on the first. I'm going to bring this up to the public for comment. This is just to remind everybody, we have been discussing this. This is for the Lake Auburn Neighborhood Community Center on North Auburn Road, excuse me. About $100,000 purchase price. We will then take this as a city-owned property and use it as a educational, ecological education center for our youth, for adults, and a bridgehead into the very extensive trail network that surrounds Lake Auburn. So, anybody in the public like to speak on this, please step up to the podium. None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any conversations on this? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've got a correspondence from Wendy Brown. She says that how can the city base, I'm paraphrasing some of it, how can the city buy this property when it's listed with a broker, and she's confirmed that it's a current and active. She says the sellers, what it's listing is the sellers have a 3-bedroom septic design and a building permit in hand for the new owners to begin immediate renovations and improvements to the property. So,
Can I can address that. I think the person who sent the email didn't understand that the city was acquiring the property. I think she thought that we were putting money into a nonprofit that was going to be sold.
Sell something?
Right.
Oh, okay,
So,
okay.
so I think that's the issue she had, and I would say that when the city sold off the CP White school property, we really cut off a lot of parking and access to the Spring Road, and so having this in place, I think would provide an additional access. Further, I skied it last winter, and it really is a very nice access to Spring Road, and will be an amenity to lots of people, I think. So I think it's money well spent.
So it's a constituent
Yeah,
confusion?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you,
Let us know if you need
Counselor
any
White.
help composing a response to that. Any
thank
other
you,
comments?
Council White.
Any other comments? None being, I'll bring this up to a vote. All those in favor of the purchase, please raise your hand. All those opposed? No?
Mr. Mayor, just clarification, you're approving the appropriation of the ARPA funds.
Oh,
not
right.
the purchase.
Okay. I'm sorry, approving the allocation of the ARPA funds, purchase of purchase, that still has to be hammered. Okay. All those in favor, ask for another vote. All those in favor? Okay. Passes unanimously. Thank you. Next is Ordinance 14-05022022, amending Chapter 60-952C, 1 through 5, for agricultural buffer strip and subsurface wastewater systems in the Lake Auburn watershed. This is a public hearing and the first out of 2 readings. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So I have a second.
Second.
Second from Councilor Staples. Open this up to the public. Is there anybody from the public who would like to speak on this? And this is colloquially called the Septic System Revision Ordinance and so forth.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Ryu, 85 Mary Carroll Street in Auburn. My feeling is we do not have a septic problem in the watershed, and that, I believe, is a fact, because I checked with the water department. There is no septic problem in the watershed. So who's going to benefit with this septic rule change and the development that will occur as a result of the change? Is it the taxpayers that benefit? So let's take a look at that. In tonight's budget, the city manager has $792,000 for public fire protection. That's not for a new fire truck. That's $792,000 for water to put out the fires. So if we lose our waiver from filtration because of the development, that fee would go to about $2 million or more. So that increase in taxes is 2 times more than all of the development that will occur in the watershed. So the taxpayers are not going to benefit. Is it the water ratepayers that are going to benefit? Well, if we lose our waiver from filtration, their water rates are going to go 3 or 4 times more. So the water ratepayers aren't going to benefit. So who's going to benefit? 2 or 3 large landowners in the watershed who made investments on land that did not pass the septic rules that we have now stand to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. Their land will account for at least half of the new housing developments. To be fair, maybe there's a handful of legitimate, well-meaning landowners who can slice off a piece of their land and sell a few acres to make a few bucks. But the total number of people who are going to benefit can be counted on these 2 hands. Every taxpayer loses, every water ratepayer loses if we cannot retain the waiver from filtration. Tens of thousands of people pay, and a handful of people will put cash in their pockets. Now, these are the conclusions that the City Council, the Planning Board, the Water District, the Watershed Protection Commission made 14 years ago when the septic rule, the exact same septic rule, was proposed. They arrived at these conclusions, that this many people benefit, tens of thousands of people take it on the chin. So nothing has changed in the last 14 years. The water's still clean and it's still protected. And I'm asking you to please do not make a change to allow further development in the watershed. Don't punish tens of thousands of people in the city of Auburn who trust you to make decisions on their behalf. They're taking it on the chin for this many people. I think there's a lot of things that stink in Auburn, but not one of the smells is due to the septic system that we have right now. Thank you very much.
Folks, anybody else that would like to speak in open session?
Pam Rousseau, 745 West Auburn Road. So I went to the planning board meetings, and one of the things that really, really concerned me, I do agree that it is important to keep our septic. I pump mine every 3 years, and I live by myself. But what is really disturbing to me is that with this new septic design, you can go up 36 inches. I think you lowered it a little bit. And then you have things that go around it so that the excess water from the rain and everything don't get into the leach field. This is the question I brought up to the planning board. So all of that water, because you have to take down trees if you're going to build a house, people like having lawns, and they like having their pavement so they can get in and out of their driveway. That leaches off the phosphorus. There was no consideration of who was going to monitor those things that go around, those curtains, I guess they call it, curtains that go around the septic systems. Those are still the homeowner's responsibility. Septic systems are only a minor part of phosphorus. The other part of phosphorus is all those things totally ignored. So I asked that you change this. I know you went from 1 to 3 acres, ooh-ha, but you need to stop. Stop. You can't take down trees and have development and expect our lake to stay the same.
Ma'am, just so you know, that's next on our agenda, everything you just described. We're voting on it. Is there anybody else from the public? No? Yeah, I'll close this open session. Bring it back to the council. Council, is there any debate on this? Yeah, let me start off with some clarification. We've talked about this quite a bit. We've seen a lot. This has probably been the biggest political learning experience in 4+ years as mayor. Heard a lot of really falsities, rumors, slander. about who's going to profit, who's not going to profit. I've seen an amazing amount of information out there. The vast majority of it's factually untrue. So we have to have a little bit of an open mind, and I think this isn't really directed to the council as much as to your constituents. When we're looking at the data, we're looking at why we're doing this, we're looking at the modeling that's occurred and what triggered this, and we looked at the letters from the EPA 15 years ago when this was first discussed, or 17 years ago now, and why we're doing it, and more importantly, why it wasn't done 17 years ago, and why we had algae blooms and a significant degradation of our water quality since then without the addition of new homes. So I think it's important, and I want to value, especially the gentleman who talked about the existing costs for existing septics. It's something that's been weighing on me and in conversations with a lot of counselors, and how do we overcome that? How do we provide that mechanism to do the right thing to make the lake cleaner, but also recognizing economic impacts on people? And I think there is some solutions, especially utilizing partnerships like LawPac, as well as the city of Lewiston, who funds half of LawPac and AWD, in order to make sure there's some sort of sinking fund there for no or low interest or grants in order to, based upon economic need, in order to make that happen when it's time to make that happen, whether this council decides it's on a period of time or it's upon failure or proof of failure or upon sale. Okay? So I'll just kind of lead in off that, but I'll open this up to the council. Council Staples.
Thank you. Yeah, so reading through the agenda packet tonight, the planning board took a good look at this. They made some recommendations. One of the recommendations, of course, was to change the zoning so that it's 3 acres for 1 unit instead of 1 acre for 1 unit. Until that zoning has been completed by us and the planning board, I don't see myself being able to support this. I also want to see in the agenda packet, it says we're going back to FB Environmental. I want to see the numbers that they come back with. I'm very interested to see what they think about adding more housing for this. I know from that Lake Auburn report, there were lots of things that were added in there. Of course, the one that you hear a lot is no development in the lake. But you also, if you read through this, you see this as the septic ordinance is highly recommended by that report. So I'd like to see from them some recommendations based on if we do this septic ordinance and it allows us to build more housing, like what are the effects? I mean, because I don't see those two talked about together, and I'd like to see some more stuff from them on that. So I guess I'm talking now to tell you that my mind is open. I want to see more data. Tonight I'm a no.
And I think, to address that, we are going to postpone the second reading until probably the first meeting in June, allowing planning board time to do their work as directed post this first reading, as well as FB Environmental to come back with more modeling that gives us a more accurate count. Because what we're doing and what we've done and we'll vote on next with our low impact design standards, actually it's above and beyond what they recommended with regards to protection standards. So that is going to affect the modeling of phosphorus load within the lake. So yes, I think we're going to allow enough time to see the most updated scientific data. Councilor Walker?
I personally would like to see us make a motion there that we table this until after the planning board has come forward with the rest of our questions that we had in place. I don't feel 100% okay with this until we are told that we will not lose this waiver on making changes.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor to table to a date post planning board. Can I ask on that, can we have Mr. Cousins and Mr. Blake come up? We have had a response from the State Drinking Water Organization or Department. Like, if you could just give us the summary of that correspondence based upon our inquiry about Councilor Walker's point.
Yeah, we did write a letter to the Maine Drinking Water Program. We've also spoken with DEP. They have not given us a very definitive opinion, but they are, as we are with the model that FB is working on, they did not consider the reduction in allowed density that the 3 acre change would do to offset any increase that's created with the septic ordinance. So we plan to resend that request to them and see if they'll give us a more definitive answer. I can share that letter with the council as well, but it was as the responses to the Auburn Water District and Lewiston Water District, they did not take a strong position on one way or another.
There's just no way to know. Nobody can, right?
One other piece to this that we need to add in the model is
John, can you talk into the
one other piece we need to add in the model with FB Environmental is the 270 systems that are existing. And as those systems fail, replacing it to the new standard. I think that's an important piece. That's going to be also included in the model. In addition to that, every system will get a LID implementation, and those specifically are the curtain drains or the diversion ditches. We ran a quick model earlier last week, and there was a net reduction in every single one of those that we installed. So it's something that we can measure as staff once we implement these new septic systems, and it's a result that we can provide back to the council and the planning board at year 2, 4, and 6 as we're recommending.
Can I request an amendment to the tabling motion, just to add FB Environmental to return as well as the
We
planning
can do a friendly
board?
amendment to that
Friendly
based
amendment,
upon, if you're
Right,
okay with that,
additional,
Councilor Walker,
yes.
Councilor Staples? Okay.
Thank you.
So basically, planning board action, one technical question on this, though. Does planning board need us to initiate this via passing the first reading for it to go to them? Or failing the first reading, for that matter? Or is it already on their docket?
So are you speaking to the 1 acre versus 3 acre density?
Exactly.
That will be a later item, number 11, in the agenda tonight.
Okay,
So
that's right.
we kept that as a separate action,
Okay.
but it is there on your agenda tonight.
So to summarize, I mean, by postponing this for a couple of weeks on a first reading, we'll have a first reading in June, second reading in June, okay, 2 June meetings, first and second on this. Allowing, of course, planning board to be done with their due diligence and FB Environmental to be done with their modeling. It's not a huge amount of time, of course. I would say that I would like, in this time frame, we have to ask ourselves, we know and we can recognize that the septic system design standard now, and nobody has been able to prove me wrong on this statement, is not good for the lake. The longer it goes on, it's been told, and Councilor Milks has been very involved with this, obviously, as chairman of AWD, the longer we go on with a failing or substandard septic system, the more harm we're causing in order to try to prevent potential harm. It's a very circular argument here. I just want us all to understand that. Is there anything else?
Mr. Mayor, I think it's time we move the question. You're not really supposed to be debating
Oh.
Bingo.
tabling motion.
You can move it all you want. I'm just,
Well,
charter says
you're
I'm
the
supposed to bring
mayor, but
information.
Robert's
So we have
rules are Robert's rules.
Robert's rules, absolutely. We got a first and a second on that. Let's bring it to a vote. All
Point
those
of
in favor of the,
information. Point of information on a tabling motion, I mean, agreed what's being said, but future tabling motions is, once the motion's been made to table, you do the up and down vote.
motion on table. So, all those in favor? To a date specific, post, planning board, and FB Environmental. Okay, it's tabled. And we're shooting for June?
So the May meeting is a week from tomorrow. Too late for the public notice, but we have it scheduled for the June 14th planning board meeting for a public hearing.
Yep. Thank you very much. We have that tabled. We're going to be moving on. Next, Next is ordinance 15-05022-022, amending chapter 60-1066, phosphorus control for any new building or structure. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Councilor Staples, second for Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public. Anybody in the public like to speak? Again, this is for the low-impact design standards in the watershed, both Taylor Pond and Lake Auburn. Correct?
I feel a little lucky. I got 3 minutes on the last one. I am very concerned about Taylor Pond, extremely concerned. This is, I've called the state, and it is a pond at risk. So I do hope that you consider not having any more phosphorus or development around Taylor Pond. Like I said, I did call the DEP, and that pond is at risk. It is very, very important. They've had trouble with that pond since, and I've got the articles to prove it, since the 20s. And it is getting better and better. So please, whatever you decide, you think about everything that we've done for Lake Auburn. We need to even be more careful with Taylor Pond. Even though it's not a drinking source, it's very, very important. So, you know all the phosphorus stuff. I'm just telling you my concern for Taylor Pond.
Just so everybody's aware, this ordinance is designed to prevent phosphorus runoff. This is designed to enhance the quality of all of our watersheds. Anybody else in the public like to speak? None being, bring it back to the council. Council, discussion, debate? This did pass unanimously by planning board as well. No comment? Okay, I'm going to ask for a vote. Roll call vote. First reading. Jill?
Counselor Moran,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Staples,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Whiting,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Yeah, passes unanimously, 7-0. Next is Order 56-05-022022, authorizing the city's general obligation bonds in the amount of $7,100,000 to finance the city's fiscal year 23 capital improvement program. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Councilor Whiting, second by Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public for comment. Anybody in the public like to comment tonight? Nope. Oh. Okay, that's enough. Bring it back to the council. Council,
Mr. Mayor,
discussion. Councilor Staples.
I'd like to make a motion to add $200,000 to the CIP for the construction of 4 crosswalks around the new Edward Little High School.
I got a motion for Councilor Staples for $200,000 to be added to the CIP for crosswalks. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Councilor Gary. Okay, open this up to the council. Councilor Staples, you made the motion. Would you like to explain this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, we discussed actually, well, no, we didn't. Sorry. So, the new Edward Little High School, excuse me, is going to direct traffic onto Western Avenue in a manner that isn't currently there. The crosswalks would be centered around that street. And I think that, really what we're looking at here is we have an opportunity to add to the walkability of the high school. So if you look at the plans for the high school, right now we have, it's trying to get people to walk to it. And right now there's a few places where I think we would be well served by a crosswalk with the flashing beacons that would be added to this. So I just think it's a good idea.
Point of order, is in the 125 million that we allocated, that the crosswalks weren't part of the,
So the thing that really stinks is that the traffic around the high school, there's no traffic improvements in that $125 million. We do have that one crosswalk on Court Street that has flashing beacons. And there are sidewalks that go in and out of the high school in the parking lot, but that's it.
nothing on the streets? Okay.
As a complete streets, Councilor Whiting, go first.
Yes, just a question for Phil and Jill. Is this something, I agree with it, but is this something we could do in a later CIP as opposed to amending this one?
So-
The high school's not going to be complete for, what, a couple of years?
No, fall of 23.
Or 23, okay, so I'm off a year.
So a good question. I think that, just to clarify, I think, Counselor Staples, you're saying up to 4. We are working through estimates right now regarding these enhanced, and they really are enhanced crosswalk areas. We're working with DOT regarding Union Street bypass currently. If you think about trying to cross Union Street bypass and the challenge there. So the designs are being done for that enhancement. we'll use that same design so we can leverage that to be able to use that, so there's no added cost. We'll be looking at, through DOT, through looking at our traffic counts, taking a look, obviously, as Councilor Staples mentioned, Western Ave will be probably the most critical area, but then we'll also be looking at doing an enhancement at the middle school, also doing close to Fairview Ave, doing an enhancement further down by Millet Drive. As we get more people walking this street, just being able to access that and cross the street is going to be really critical. So timing, though, Councilor Whiting, I think with the project that's being done to be able to jump on that project makes sense for us to do it now.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will any of the opera money be available to be used for the projects that the good Councilor Staples has recommended?
You could, we'd have to go and look, but I believe you could go ahead and allocate that for this if you'd rather not bond it.
I would state on that, it's been a longstanding principle of the council, this council and the past council, to invest ARPA monies into projects that have a tangible return on investment from a capital standpoint. Crosswalks don't, road construction doesn't. Historically, that's why we haven't been spending it, we've been bonding it, because it's a long-term process.
And I would add that I went to the last Complete Streets meeting last week, and this was a topic that we discussed as far as it's a shame that we didn't have that in the bonded money for the $125 million to begin with.
I would just like to comment that I would like to see where they're going to be put and exactly the blinking light. I'm not so happy with that many times because that thing blinks for 5 minutes after the kids have crossed. You go on Court Street, it'll back up 10 cars waiting for that to stop blinking because people won't cross it. So I'd want to make sure if we're going to do this right in the right places.
Yeah, it'll be a lot more enhanced than what you're seeing now with just the blinking light crossing. And if this is in the budget as we move forward, we'll have a presentation back to you once we have traffic counts and where the best locations will be. The key is to try to ensure that we're crossing not mid-streets. That's what we're trying to really avoid, is these mid-street crossings. We need these crossings at intersections. That's where they're most safe for pedestrians. And so as we continue to work on that and working with DOT and our Complete Streets Committee on identifying the best locations, that'll come back to you.
Councilor Gary, last comment?
I've got a question for what you just said. You were saying that the opera money was more used for, like, business capital expenses. Is that what you just
It was
said?
more of a direct short-term return on investment,
Okay.
ROI.
With that said, having these crosswalks make it, the return on investment may not be monetary, but it'll be more usage by the Auburn residents as well as kids and people that would like to just get out and stuff. It's more of a safety, and to me, that's a higher price for
Councilor Gary, if you'd like, then you can vote against this, obviously, in the CIP and introduce another order that would allocate ARPA money towards this process. Every councilor has that ability to do so. I'm just letting you know what historically has been done and the reason why. So right now, we do have a motion on the table to increase the CIP by $200,000 in order to build crosswalks in on the Court Street, Western Avenue area. In a second. Is there one last comment? No last comments? I'd like to ask for a vote. Show of hands. All those in favor of the amendment by Councilor Staples, please raise your hand. Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you.
And I think we've done in the past, just for clarification, that we can take something out of the CIP and allocate ARPA money and do that, just so everybody out here understands that we're putting that money in for the crosswalks and if we need to address that. So,
Is there any other amendments, any other discussion on the CIP before I ask for a vote? It's all in your packet right now.
Yeah, I have one for you, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Walker?
I've spoken with the director of the Boys and Girls Club there, and I'm sorry, I can't think of his last name right now, but Gary. And that gym floor over there is is had it. That floor needs to be replaced in that building. And he has researched it, and right now, it looks like it would be around $50,000 to replace that gym floor. And because of what is going to be happening with jumping across the river and coming back to our side with I believe the amount of kids are going to double the use of that building. I think it's time that we replace it, so I'd like to make a motion that we replace that floor in the building that we own. It doesn't belong to them. They run all the operations for us, but that's our building. It's, needs a new floor. That floor is unsafe in that building because of the way it's rolling up and breaking up and
I second.
other.
You got a second? Okay, yep. At a $50,000 motion to amend the CIP to add $50,000 for the Boys and Girls Club. Just quick technical question. Are they on a triple net lease, modified gross? Are they responsible for all the maintenance? I know we replaced the roof 2 years ago-ish. And our,
So, Mr.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mr. Mayor, what I would recommend is go ahead and move the 7.3 and then add $50,000 to the CIP, and then staff would be able to ensure that that either is going to be funded through other funds, which would be CDBG, or unallocated funds that we have. So I would leave
Very
this at 7.3. 7.3.
okay, leave this at 7.3.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay, so we have a couple options. I'm just going to paraphrase what you're saying here, make sure we got it right. We can strike down this motion to amend, Councilor Walker, no, but with understanding the purpose, and give the manager time to find some money in the unallocated CIP or operating budget or another source.
Just make another motion afterwards to go ahead and allocate the 50,000.
To allocate, that would bring it up to 7 point,
Just allocate it to the CIP, not necessarily into the bond.
got it, not necessarily in the bond, very good.
Okay, I removed my motion.
Yep, you can remove it, very good. So we have a motion on the table right now. Actually, at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to increase the CIP amount to 7.35, $7,350,000, 200 for crosswalks, $50,000 for floor.
No, this will stay the same. Just we'll go ahead and leave that motion.
Oh, just leave it on that?
Just leave it on that.
Okay. So I
Councilor
won't
Walker's
entertain-
going to make another motion after you're done with this.
I love bonding. We should do this every month.
Phil, we have the one coming up for the unallocated, we can do it there.
Can add it to that.
Okay. So right now, we still have the $7.1 million in the initial order.
0.3.
2.
7.3.
7.3, sorry, 7.3.
Yep.
Do I have anything else before I call for a vote? None being? Okay. I'm going to ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor Moran,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Staples,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Counselor Whiting,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
CIP passes by a vote of 6-1. Next is Resolve 03-05022022, adopting the Appropriations Resolve for fiscal year. Hold on a second.
You're on number 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Next is Order 57-05022022, authorizing the reallocation of $362,000 from previous general obligation bonds that were unspent to fund a portion of the city's FY 22-23 CIP. First reading, public hearing will take place on the 16th of May. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
This
Motion,
is
Councilor
where
Gary,
I'd like
second,
to make
Councilor.
the motion to add the 50,000 for the Boys and Girls Club flooring.
Second it.
Got a motion on the floor to add $50,000 in the unallocated. Do we have sufficient capital in the unallocated balance?
We'll seek other funding.
Very good then. Okay, I've got a motion on the table. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Do I have? Hold on 1 second. Okay. So that's adding 50,000 unallocated. Do I have any other comment, debate? I'd like to recommend, or bring this up for your consideration right now, looking at how we're paying for certain things. We have under police $35,000 for patrol rifle replacement. I'd like to ask the Mr. Manager if that's an absolute necessity on this one. It seems like we just replace these periodically every few years. And entertain a motion if someone wants to make.
So your rifles do require replacements. Currently, we're beyond warranty on the rifles that we have, so replacements will become more expensive as we move forward. We typically get better purchasing price when we go out and bid for complete replacements, and then we sell back the rifles that we have to offset some of that cash flow that comes back in to offset the price. So that's the intention, what's being intended on this. What you could do is you could put this off a year if you'd like. It's just, we might have a risk of replacing a rifle and it'll just be an added cost, but that's something we look at. We do look at proper maintenance. We also look at replacement schedules. So if this one's delayed, then that might delay whatever that next project for purchases that the PD might have, because we do, if you look at the CIP plan, they are staggered throughout the 5 years.
Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mr. Manager, I'd like to see us cut that in half and stagger it a little bit instead of us getting hit with trying to buy this many at one shot. So I'd like to make a motion that we budget $17,500.
Got a motion on the floor to budget $17,500 versus $35,000. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Staples. Any debate, discussion? Councilor Moore?
Mr. Manager, do you know offhand what the warranty length is on the rifles in question?
I don't.
Any other comment? No? I'm going to ask for a vote on this time. All those in favor of the motion to amend? All those opposed? Passes 6-1. Is there anything else on the unallocated bond proceeds, expenditures that we'd like to discuss at this time? None being, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Staples,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Whiting,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Mills.
Yes.
Passes unanimously. Next is Resolve 03-05-022-022, adopting the appropriation resolve for fiscal year 2023. This is a public hearing and the first reading. Do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
Motion from Councilor Walker. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilor Milks. Open this up to the public. Anybody in the public like to speak on our budget? This is our big budget every year, at least the municipal and intergovernmental side.
That is 24 Rulite Lane. I know you probably had to hear from me on this. Just a couple of comments. I'm hoping that there's members of the board who will be a voice for the taxpayer on this. Looking at operating expenses at 9% increase seems a bit much, resulting in a 5% increase in the levy. I don't know. I know that we did a pretty decent job the past few years controlling expenses. I don't know if runaway inflation has given us an excuse to just start raising or expending money, but it's just starting a dangerous precedence to have our operating expenses higher than the schools in terms of a percentage. So I would just ask, please, there should be a voice for the taxpayer on that board somewhere. And then one other question, maybe you can answer it at a later date, but I don't remember, do you vote for the school board's budget separately in a separate resolve at some point down the? So can you vote for tonight's 23 budget and as a whole that includes the school budget without first voting for the school's individual budget? Thank you.
Yeah, that happens every year,
No, it's separate.
'cause it's the
It is combined with a separate school budget approval on May 16th, 2022. So first reading, school, second reading, final. And then final after new valuations are released after the budgets. And again, just so everybody knows, no, that just happens, of course, but it's still, school budget still goes to the people to be voted on as well. So there's a couple more checks and balances in this process. Okay. Anybody want to talk about the budget? This is where we're going to take it nice, slow, because it's a lot of numbers.
Yeah, Mr. Manager, I had a question if it's okay. So we've been talking for quite a while now about the online budget portal, and I was hoping to be able to use that for preparation for tonight, and I see that it's still not available. Could you speak to that and let us know when that's going to be out there?
Did you just try to get on?
Yeah.
So, we got it. We'll clarify it. It was supposed to be up and running this afternoon. My last message was that it was up and running. So the fact that it's not, I'm not sure where the glitch is. As you remember, council, this is a new portal that we're using with Munis to be able to access that. Still not? Okay. So we'll clarify, IT when they left today was that it was operating. So we'll have to find out why it's not.
Unless I'm in the wrong place, I believe it should be right on the budget. It still says coming soon.
Should be on that page.
We'll make sure you get the right.
Okay. We have 2 readings on this. If we need to have an extra meeting on this, we will. Okay? This is one of our primary functions in the charter. But right now, are there any adds, deletes, any motions to amend? Anything, any line item? Counselor Staples.
I'd like to make a motion to add $25,000 to this year's municipal budget for the sole purpose of adding street trees, planting street trees for the city arborist.
Second.
Motion on the floor right now to add street trees at a cost of $25,000 to the operating budget for the city of Auburn. Any debate?
I guess I'd just like to explain this, especially for the public that's here. So we've been working on a street tree ordinance for the city well, I mean, we haven't approved it yet, but the intent is going to be to have a plan in place for when we lose a street tree. We need to replant it somehow. So there's language that's been drafted, and it will appear at a meeting at some point. But what the intent of this motion is to give this program a little bit of money to start with, so that during this year's road construction season, if there are street trees that are cut down during road construction, or through disease or whatever happens, if a street tree comes down, then we have a plan in place to put it back up, so that we're not just diminishing that stock of street trees. So that's where I'm coming from with this.
Very good. Is there anybody that would like to speak in opposition to trees and clean air? No? Okay. Well, that's good. I'm going to ask for a vote on the motion to amend.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any chance, Jill, you could find any extra money in the unspent bond proceeds that we just amended? Can you shake out another
I don't think we can
25,000?
use it enough for that.
I'll do that, Liz, Jill. So we wouldn't do that out of the bond, just because if you think about the interest and then what you're going to be paying over the next few years on that, I think this would be the appropriate way.
Okay.
And then if the council wants, we can look at what else we need to do as far as how to cover that 25,000.
Thank you.
On that too, and Mr. Manager, you might want to pipe in here too if you'd like, but after we do all of our amendments, we're going to have a revised mill rate. Everything will be revised before our second reading, so we can look at it as a whole. Okay, and see what the final outcome is. I must ask for a vote. All those in favor of Councilor Staples' amendment, please raise your hand. Okay, passes 7-0. Okay. Entertain any more amendments, changes?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to add $50,000 to the legal budget.
Got a motion on the floor to add $50,000 to our legal budget, bringing that up from $90,000 to $140,000. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Hawes. Mr. Milks, or Councilor Milks made
Yep.
the motion.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of stuff going on with various agreements and other potential legal obligations that we may have, and I want to make sure that we have that money in in the budget if we were to so need it.
Mr. Manager, do you see anything wrong with this? Obviously, if the money, this is just in the budget, if the money's not spent, it rolls right back into our fund balance at the end of the year. Do you see this as a needed expenditure?
I can tell you in the last month, anyway, our typical monthly allocation to legal has doubled. And so if we're going to continue on the track that we are, I would say you're going to need to allocate some additional funds, or what typically would happen is, as we do in each monthly finance report, we come back and we give you updates on where we are with certain line items. If this was in jeopardy of going over, that's what your emergency reserve is for, and we would come back and we'd ask you to allocate from the emergency reserve, which you budget, and help offset that line item. So you have a system in place, but I would say if we're going to continue on this trajectory, you will see overages in that line item.
Yeah, I'm going to say right now that, I mean, there's, every interlocal agreement is probably up for review. It's been talked about now for years, from water to sewer to airport, 911, buses, et cetera. That's all going to, and the zoning that we're going through, the petitions and so forth, they're all requiring legal reviews. So, I mean, I can definitely see, just based upon my conversation with the city manager, that it's worthwhile. Councilor Whiting, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I guess just a comment. I think the taxpayers would prefer to see that we not need to spend this money, and I would prefer to just amend the budget later if we need it and try to avoid it. I think that would be the smarter thing to do.
Mr. Mayor, just to make sure we're using a good term here, we would use the emergency reserve funds and not amend the budget. Use the emergency reserve funds.
On an ongoing basis, in a reactive mode versus a proactive. You'd have to come to us every time someone versus, and sheltering the money that we currently have for legal, proactive legal.
Yeah, so that's the system that's in place now, is that if each month, if the finance report, if we're seeing that it's being, you did this a couple years ago, very rarely do we do it, but we started a few years ago with purchasing of salt. I think it was Public Works had an overage that needed to be reallocated. Money was taken out of the emergency reserve to make that happen. You can do either one here. I can tell you that the trajectory that we're seeing, at least in this last month, is that you will have an overage in this line item.
Okay. Any other, anybody want to comment on this? Yes, Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to ask City Manager Phil, with the fire department, you know, every year I've been here and I've complained about the overtime. Is there a way that we could look at the overtime by reversing it somehow if we hired a full-time person
Hold on.
versus,
I'm sorry, Councilor Walker. We just have a motion on the floor that's not on that topic. Can we solve that motion first? Motions, and then we'll come right back. You can make that motion, okay, or that question. Is there any other questions or comments on the motion that's on the floor? None being? I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor of increasing the line item for legal to $140,000 from $90,000, please raise your hand. Those against? 2. Okay, passes 5-2. Now we're back open. Councilor Walker?
all right. I would rather that we have a full-time fireman there if it's going to benefit us, instead of spending this amount of overtime every year, and we argue and fight about it every year. I know going back 3 years ago, we hired on a couple new, maybe it's been 5 now, time goes fast. But if that would be possible again, I think we'd be better off to have a full-time person if it can help us to reduce some of this overtime. Because I think it's asking a lot of firemen in a lot of cases to work these overtime hours.
Yeah, so the, good question, Counselor. Jill, do you recall the amount that Chief Chase had provided for us? We can make that available for you. We'll certainly have it for the second reading. Chief Chase did put in a proposal of what it would take to offset the overtime, but there was a cost to that, I believe.
$68,000.
$68,000 to add to the budget would allow the chief to hire 4 additional firefighters that would reduce that overtime. If you recall, several years ago, I think Counselor Titus was was part of the work group that evaluated that, and 4 additional firefighters were brought on at that time to reduce some overtime. These 4 additional would be at a cost of $68,000 of current costs. Now, there's going to be annual growth that takes place with that.
But we're spending more than that in overtime.
So that's the net. So the net increase would be 68, reducing your overtime, adding that overtime savings into the purchase, plus $68,000.
I also see it, if we could do that, a benefit with EMS, because we are going to be taking on a lot of burden in the future, especially if something happens with the other ambulance services across the river. So I think we need to be on top of a fire department and having enough manpower to make sure that we're not going to have people working around the clock 5 days a week.
Any other questions, comments, amendments? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm troubled by the budget considering the CPU has been high this year, higher than most any years. If it wasn't for the fact that it has gotten that high, I'm pretty confident that our budget would have been in lower because the CPI was sort of the cap because we had to stay within a certain perimeter. I would like to see the budget lower, but given said, tonight, the good police chief, he wants to restructure his department. I would like to amend our budget to include his proposal and have it done within the means of the current money in the budget.
Just 1 second, I'm sorry. Folks in the audience, if you're having sidebar conversations in the back, please, if you could just keep that down or go in the hallway. Thank you. Continue.
Thank you. So instead of adding more money, I would like the good city manager to find it within the budget, the current budget proposal that we have tonight, including whatever you guys throw on it, but with no more money increase. Because what they were saying in our workshop tonight, just his proposal alone would be 11 cents if the mayor's figuring is accurate. That's a big jump on our mill rate. So I'd like to include it in the budget the way it is.
You didn't make a motion.
Yes, I did.
That was a motion?
Yes.
Second.
Okay. I've got a motion, I got a second, to kick the budget back to the manager?
Basically, take
I
the
just need
proposal.
the summarization of the motion. if I
Yes,
could, please.
take this proposed proposal of the good police chief, take it, put it back into the budget, but have the city manager redefine and find the money within the budget. In other words, no more increase.
Okay, so, I'm going to paraphrase this so we get it right. We have a motion on the floor, seconded by Councilor Staples, to include the additional police reconfiguration of $270,000.
Which was net.
Net.
Revenue and expense.
Yep, so $270,000 net cost added into the budget to be mill rate neutral.
Yes.
Mill rate neutral, I have a second. Do I have a, ask for a vote? All those in favor? All those opposed? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, discussion. It's budget time. Go for it, talk. Yeah, Councilor Moore.
The one reason why I don't like this amendment is it kind of, and if I'm off on my process here, it takes away our ability to look at the different components of the chief's proposal and possibly take a portion of his recommendations. And the motion you're making right now is for the whole recommendation, which is a large sum of money. And I personally feel like we need to take a harder look at that and have the possibility of prioritizing that. So I will be voting against this motion.
Could you amend it? To do it, to ask the city manager to offer both? I don't know.
And not a bad idea, but, we just heard this recently, and, a little bit of time to think about what the ramifications of that vote is, I don't think is a poor thing.
This is, it's at this stage of the game, and you've done a lot of budgets, Councilor. This is a diffusion of the responsibility that's vested inside the council. At this point, when the manager submits his budget, It's up to the council to make the appropriate additions or deletions from the budget versus saying, cut this or add this and with this outcome. So that is, actually, it's just not done, right? This is where we work on the budget. The manager has proposed his budget. So,
It's
motion's
not-
on the floor,
Excuse
but I'm
me.
just saying, it's not by protocol. This is our budget at this point.
Mr. Mayor, may I please? Thank you. It's not unheard of in previous councils' dealings with the budget. Instead of line item and try to cut this and that out, to tell the city manager, we want a lower budget, or ask him if we wanted to put something in, for him to look into departments to figure out how he can pare down the current budget to meet that goal. It's not deflecting our responsibility, it's allowing him flexibility to know more control.
Any other debate, discussion? I'll say in the 4 years as mayor, we haven't done it. But, any other comments? No? I'll ask for a vote,
May I get a roll call vote, please?
of course.
Counselor Moran,
No.
Counselor Walker,
No.
Counselor Staples,
Yes.
Counselor Gary,
Yes.
Counselor Whiting,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
No.
Counselor Mills.
Yes.
So that motion to amend, as stated, passes 4-3.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make the motion that we increase our fire department by the amount of men that Chief Case says that.
68,000.
68,000.
We got a motion on the floor to increase the fire department operating budget by $68,000. Do I have a second?
Point of order, would that motion include reducing the overtime budgets anywhere?
That's what it would do.
So,
We would take the fire chief's proposal that was made, and we would work that through, so the increase would only be $68,000.
I have a motion. I don't have a second. I need a second on this motion. Do I have a second? I don't have a second.
I'll
Motion.
second it.
I have a motion, and I have a second for Counselor Gary. Debate? Basically, in a nutshell, what you're trying to do is increase the headcount by 1 additional fireman with the intent of decreasing the amount of overtime.
4 fire.
4, I'm sorry, 4.
Would be 4.
By 1.
Question, Mr. Manager, how many firemen are we short of headcount today?
Currently, we have 4 vacancies.
So we'd now have 8 vacancies if we add these 4.
Well, we just did testing this past week, and we had, I believe, 4 candidates pass the physical, and I'm not sure how many passed on Saturday. So we're looking to bring in a rookie class sometime, hopefully in June or July, to both fill those. And so if council were to move forward with this, that would elongate that process and hopefully fill a few more of those vacancies. So this is in anticipation of the current vacancies, and we have anticipated 1 retirement coming up as well. So it would put us to even. If another 4 were added, then we would try and, I would imagine, I don't want to speak for Chief Chase, but either put them in that rookie class or have another one in the fall.
And just to be clear, this is Chief Chase's
Proposal?
proposal?
This is his, you received
Yep.
a few projects. This was Chief Chase's project that he proposed. What we could do, council, if you need more information, I'd recommend to table this motion, and we would have Chief Chase present at the next meeting for the workshop, and then you can make a decision on it at your second reading, if you'd like.
Any more debate? Done? Additional motions, amendments?
I'd like to make a motion to table this to the next workshop until we hear from Chief Chase and ascertain exactly the benefit of this.
I got a motion I got a motion, I got a second from Councilor Milks, but I got a motion to table this till May 16th. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Okay. We're still in the budget.
Mr. Mayor, could I just some clarification? So looking through salaries, at the last meeting, I asked for a list of headcount on staff. We didn't get that. So maybe for the next one, that'd be good. Looking at salaries for business and community development and economic development, we have business and community development at 109,291 increase. I believe that was the downtown coordinator. Is that right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And the economic development was a 52526 increase. What was that?
$52,526 under regular salaries, economic development, page
Correct.
14.
The 52,526, is that what you're?
Yes, please.
So that is your downtown coordinator.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is
So
that what
what,
you asked me?
well, there were two, yeah, so that's one of them. What was the other, the one above it, the 109?
Community development, 109 increase.
So business and community development, look at that increase. That is regarding the added staffing positions that are a result of the HUD grant and the reconfiguration of CDBG staff. Those are being all offset in your revenue account.
Okay, so those, they're new positions, they're being paid for through revenue, through CDBG funds, but we have to show for them here.
You have to show them in your expense,
Got it,
and then you offset in your revenue.
got it. I just want to be able to
Yep,
answer
no, great
questions
question.
about it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Amendments? If not, I'm going to close this up and ask for a roll call vote. Roll call vote.
So we have 3 amendments, correct?
Say again?
Just want to make sure.
3 amendments?
Or two.
Right.
Oh. Yes, 25,000 add, 50,000 add, and then the APD restructure,
Well, we have the
With no impact.
68,000.
huh?
And no impact, the
No
motion for
impact
no
to the
impact
budget.
on the mill.
Okay, I just want to make sure I had everything.
Yep.
Okay, Counselor Moore,
Yes.
Counselor Walker,
Yes.
Counselor Staples,
No.
Counselor Gary,
No.
Counselor Whiting,
Yes.
Counselor Hawes,
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Passes 5-2.
Mr. Mayor, so the link to the portal will be up momentarily, so they're working on it. now. There's a
Thank
break
you.
in the link.
Appreciate it.
Next is Order 58-05022022, authorizing school committee to establish an Everett Little High School Capital Reserve Fund for purpose of funding capital improvement projects, facility upgrades, and planned maintenance at the new Everett Little High School and adjacent athletic fields. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion, Councilor Whiting, second from Councilor Staples. Open this up to the public for comment. Anybody in the public like to comment on this? No? Bring it back to the council. Council, as a reminder, this is their long-term maintenance fund for the new high school. Councilor Staples?
You can correct me if this isn't needed, but I'd like to make a motion that this account be used only for its intended purpose and funds not be reallocated to other things.
I'll second it.
I'm going to ask for a point of clarification from Jill. On these resolves, creating these funds, they do have to have approval by the school board before allocation for its purpose? Or do we have to have, or could we have a further clarifying amendment that was just made?
I believe they do have to have approval by the school board. And I just want to mention that next week on the resolve, when we do the school, is added to the appropriation resolve. The attorney requested, because they're going to request to fund these for this coming year, but no expenditures out of it. And that will be on there as well for both the two that are coming up. So, just so you know.
Okay, so
But they do have to request those funds, and they have to be approved to be spent before, they can't just spend them.
So this is somewhat, I hate to say this, a moot point, but there's already checks and balances in place. But we do have a motion to amend unless the member who made the motion would like to withdraw.
I'll take it off. I just want to make sure that, these aren't used for something else down the road.
This is very similar to any type of allocation or reallocation that we make from our CIP or general fund.
Perfect.
general
Yeah,
fund to
I
fund balance.
rescind that.
Okay. I'd like to ask for a vote at this time unless there's further conversation. None being, all those in favor? Opposed? None. Passes 7-0. Next is Order 59-05022022, authorizing the school committee to establish school technology equipment reserve fund for the purpose of funding purchase and maintenance of computers, tablets, audiovisual equipment, and related technology for the high school. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, for school department, sorry, school department. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Staples, second by Councilor Moran. Open this up to the public for comment.
Thank you, Andy Titus, 24 Ruby Light Lane. I just wanted to make a mention, I think I heard Director Eastman say that the school department could decide to raid those funds. If they voted to raid the fund, they could. And my concern is that they set up a reserve account that's for a particular purpose, and 2 years from now, they decide they want to balance the budget with that fund. The school board can vote to balance the budget with that fund. So I was hoping there could be some sort of a resolve written or something written into this that says it cannot be used for anything but what its intended purposes were. Because too many times we get down the road, I love reserve accounts. They're great, but when you build up a nice reserve account and then we have a tight budget season, they raid, it has a tendency to raid those accounts to balance the budget. And then you're just voting for additional spending down the road rather than for the particular purpose in which it was intended. So just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
As Chair of the Finance Department, I'll open up some dialogue in this. As Chair of the Finance Department for the school committee, we've talked about a policy letter, and Counselor, I should have mentioned that before, so that we did talk about a policy letter specifically outlining exactly what this, or within what department or category these funds had to be spent in. That doesn't mean that, not unlike lots of other bodies, they can't change that in the future. There's nothing that's foolproof about that, of course. But I will say that I have requested that, and it will get done too. It's kind of all happening simultaneously. So, is there any other debate or comment?
Just a comment, I think it's wise to put language in that does restrict it. I think former Councilor Titus's point is well taken, and, so the appropriate language. I was under that, method of operating for years with these properties that Auburn Housing Authority managed, and they were clearly defined for specific purposes, and it worked very well. And they never could be rated for other purposes, or we would have been, in trouble.
Is there any other comment? None being?
I'll make the motion to do the same thing for this one. Make this account so that it can only be used for the intended purpose.
Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
A second for Councilor Milks. I will say, on this one topic of infrastructure with regards to technology, I absolutely support that. Technology is such an ambiguous term nowadays, and considering the city is actually responsible for the maintenance of the facilities, there is a nice check and balance there, unlike what's here. So we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor of the motion? 7-0. Okay. So now we have the motion as standard amended that this this money will only be used for technology capital purchases. We're back to the original motion. Any other comments? None being? Ask for vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Passes 7-0. Okay. Next, Order 60-05-022022, authorizing city staff to draft amendments consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan for consideration by the planning board, and direct the planning board to review proposed amendments, hold public hearings on each, and forward a recommendation back to the city council. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Staples, second by Councilor Walker. We're going to open this up to the public for comment, just so to remind everyone in the public that's here. This ties back into septic ordinances. It sends initial recommendations to the planning board that they actually recommended to us. So they will have those hearings and official public notice and so forth. Public comment? None? Bring it back to the council. Yes?
Evening, Bob Hayes, 172 Allen Avenue. I think there needs to be some clarification to the public with respect to adopted comprehensive plan. Many times we've talked about Comprehensive Plan 2021. At the state level, they do not recognize that presently. I think what we've done, we've had 3 updates to the three chapters updated. Those have gone to the state. Even those have not been reviewed at the state level. In fact, I think there's a 5-week comment period that is open. Even that hasn't been opened yet. So that open period, comments are requested from departments at the state level. Comments are requested from surrounding communities, and also public comments from the town itself. We should expect that 5-week period probably commencing within the next 2 weeks. After that period, then the municipal planning office can, have findings of consistency. But that's probably not even going to be out until possibly August. So I think it's misleading and frustrating, to me at least, that we talk about the Comprehensive Plan 2021. We don't have it. In fact, the Municipal Planning Office still expects this city, Auburn, and other towns, every 12 years, the comprehensive plan that we've been referring to, 2010, they actually have it after the findings of consistency dated 2012. They expect by 2024, the city actually submit a true comprehensive plan. And that would replace the 2010. Thank you.
Anybody else from the public like to speak? No? Very good. Okay. Just one quick question. Mr. Manager, we adopted the plan, we modified it, we worked on it. By default, it's our plan, correct? Under Home Rule statute?
So what staff was noting is that it has been adopted by the city council. I think I would ask Eric just if he has any clarifying points on that.
We've made the complete submittal to the state of the plan that was adopted by the council. We have not received findings of consistency. Our submittal was more extensive than just the individual chapters because we are in hopes that the plan update was substantive enough that it restarts that 12-year clock. We don't have a definite answer on that yet.
Yep.
But we are expecting comments back from the state and eventually a finding of consistency.
Yep. Thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. Bring it back to council debate. Councilor Staples.
I'd just like to say there's a map inside of the agenda packet tonight that shows the watershed boundary and the proposed map amendment. I'm just asking not to send that out to the public. I hope that map can be amended a little bit, just for readability. I find that map difficult to understand, and I mean, it's all the same color to me. So I don't know if we could use a different color for the watershed or make it a little bit more clear is all. If something is going to get sent out to the public is what I'm requesting.
We'll address that.
Any other comment? None? Okay. I'm going to ask for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? 5-2 passes. Any other unfinished business?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to untable an order, and it is order 46-03 to 82022, which was the rezoning of 4.2.
Okay, that order specifically references the 120-day table that's in effect. I don't remember when it expires off the top of my head, but I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, Councilor Staples on a second. Open this up to the public for discussion. No? So I'll take a moment and explain. When we initially passed 4.2 in the downtown development district, traditional development district, excuse me, there is a subsequent order asking the planning board to review within 120 days or after 120 days of the zoning to look for consistencies, inconsistencies, and potentially make any adjustments. Councilor Hawes, correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor, just made a motion to reconsider the table motion which will then stop it from being tabled and immediately send it out to the planning board to incorporate in their work schedule. So instead of waiting 120 days or 4 months after it already took effect, it will go to planning board for any modification, revision, or a new zone to be created. Correct. Correct. The Court Street, Lake Street area. So I have a motion. I have a second. Any debate? Or excuse me, public comment. Public comment.
Hi, my name is Elizabeth Dunn, 530 Court Street. I just want to be sure that what we're untabling and perhaps asking the planning board to reconsider that will require more public hearings or notifications so that maybe the residents will be heard and our considerations might be taken into account. Thank you.
Yes. Any other comment from the public? Okay, now I'm going to bring it back to the council. Council, questions, debate? Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we send this, if we untable it and send it back to the planning, or send it to the planning board for them to review it and make amendments, is that going to trash these initiatives and make them a moot point?
I don't know. Any other comment, discussion?
I would like to amend the motion to include a process involving public participation in the form-based code elements, just to make sure that we're thoroughly reviewing and not just the 4.2.
Okay, there will be a public participation and comment. It's automatically built into the
Including
planning
the
board.
form-based code, though. I'm not sure that's part of this.
This is
I could be wrong.
Yeah, I think this is, just as a motion to untable, I'd actually have to check Robert's rules. I'm not sure if a motion to untable or reconsider even allows debate, almost to your point earlier.
Second.
Right. I could be wrong. Excuse me. Honestly, I don't think we've dealt with this in like 3 years.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to untable, motion to reconsider, I'm sorry. So, again, that sends everything back to planning board for their public process and work. All those in favor of the motion to reconsider the table?
Hold on, can I just,
Yeah.
I just want to talk this out a little bit. So, so this is going to take 4.2 in its entirety and send it to planning board to examine and decide whether or not we want to make any changes to 4.2. The planning board will discuss that. They'll have the process.
Yeah.
And then we'll come back in the council and discuss this. So there are several steps here that need to happen. Yeah, that's the one I was looking at.
That's exactly what it is.
And
then
so,
it comes back to restart in this process with this
right.
board.
And so, as part of this, we have Eric here, and this is good. I noticed that the planning board has a meeting tomorrow night to discuss 4.2 for some other parcels. I would hope that the planning board would take this and discuss it prior to doing the zoning changes on those other parcels. But I mean, I know tomorrow's just a workshop, so it's not that they're actually making any actions at this point, but that would be my hope.
Okay.
Just for a couple clarifications.
Yeah, yes.
The agenda's already set
I
for that
understand.
meeting, so,
Right.
but I think Eric will take that information and share that back to the planning board. But I just want to make sure, nothing you do tonight is going to affect that agenda.
Right.
It's
and
already on the agenda.
It's just
so
a
they'll be-
workshop, but I mean,
Yeah.
They're workshopping it. So
Yeah.
I think we can safely assume that they will be mentioning this during their workshop and it'll be a variable. Okay. Very good. We have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Passes 5-2. Okay. Next, open session. This is the last one of the night. If anybody would like to speak who hasn't spoken during an open session about a topic which is not on tonight's agenda, please come to the podium, name, address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Of your packet, please?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Can you go back to the page? I just want to show that what I'm talking about. I want to bring up the fact of Taylor Pond. And you have it on page 65 of your packet. I don't know how I can do that, but anyway, in the Taylor Pond, and part of it is in the Taylor Pond watershed, it is purple. And purple means 16 units per acre. And I am just throwing it out there, I am very, very concerned with the Taylor Pond watershed having 16 units per acre in it, and even 8 units. So I just throw that out there. This is really, really important. I mentioned it before with the phosphorus. I would like to see just you to think about it before this comes up, before all the meetings, is that you need to reconsider the Taylor Pond purple color.
Okay. I'll now close, unless there's someone else for public session or open session. None being, I'll close open session. We'll move on to reports. Mayor's report. There's a lot of activity going on this week. I have to have it pulled up. I'm going to pull it up. We have Auburn Business Association Citizen of the Year coming up on
May 17th.
Thank you, May 17th. We also have the CM, Central Maine Community College, this Thursday. Hold on one second.
May 4th.
May 4th. Oh, I'm in June, that's why it's like coming up. May 4th, this Wednesday, starting at 3:30 at the Hilton Garden Inn. It's their annual Education Foundation event and fundraiser. So there's a lot of things going on within the city. Please keep kind of looking at the city calendar and keep your emails up. So we're off COVID, that's for sure. So everybody's meeting back in person. Any other reports, councilors? Committee reports, subcommittee reports? I'm being Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple items. One, I appreciate the mayor and council's taking a look at the ICMA training that we were able to schedule. I think you'll find this beneficial. This will be 6 series of training, including about an hour and a half for each session that the council and the mayor will be going through. Everything from the forming of a city manager form government that Auburn operates in, to policy making, to ethics, to proper planning. And so this is a great opportunity for the council to be part of this training, and that'll take place over the next 6 weeks. Also, June 10th will be the celebration for the naming of the footbridge that will be between the city of Lewis and Auburn in memory of former Mayor John Jenkins. So I just want to put that out as an early date reminder for people to reserve, is June 10th. We've been working with a team of Lewiston and other residents working up for that celebration. Mayor Jenkins' celebration of life will be on June 11th. And so having this opportunity to name this footbridge, which was already approved by the council on June 10th, but this will be the ceremony. So we'll get more information on details to the public and to you soon. That's all I had. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you. Nothing else? We do not have an executive session. We already handled that one earlier in the day. And I'll move right into adjournment. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I got a motion from Councilor Milks and a second from Councilor Moran. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we now stand adjourned. Whew.